Hungary-Ukraine relations refers to the bilateral relations between Hungary and Ukraine. The modern bilateral relationship between Hungary and Ukraine formally began in the early 1990s. After the end of communism in Hungary in 1989 and Ukrainian independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. Since then, the relationship has been marred by controversy over the rights of the Hungarian minority in the western Ukrainian region of Zakarpattia, where 150,000 ethnic Hungarians reside. Both Hungary and Ukraine maintain embassies in Kiev and Budapest, respectively, as well as a number of consulates in regions with large minority populations. As told by the Primary Chronicle, the first interactions between the Hungarians and Kievan Rus occurred towards the end of the 9th century during the Hungarian conquest of the Carpathian Basin, at a Skol's grave in Kiev. During the Hungarian migration from the Russian steppe to the Pannonian Basin, the Hungarians crossed the Dnieper River near Kiev, the capital of Kievan Rus. There, they stayed at the site of a Skol's grave, eventually passing peacefully through the city. During the Middle Ages, the location of a Skol's grave became known in Ukrainian as Uhosk Urocheshche, in memory of the Hungarian passage through the area, and retains that name today. In 895, the Hungarians entered the Pannonian Basin through the Varekar Pass in the Carpathian Mountains, where they went on to establish the Kingdom of Hungary. In 1996, the Hungarian government received permission from Ukraine to install a monument commemorating the 1100th anniversary of the passing of the Hungarians through the Varekar Pass and the Hungarian conquest of the Carpathian Basin. Completed in 2008 by Hungarian sculptor Peter Mattel, the structure sits on the border of Lviv and Zakarpattia oblasts near the village of Klimets. During the Hungarian invasions of Europe of the 10th century, the Hungarians and Kievan Rus at various times found themselves allied with one another. In 943, Rus forces provided support for a Hungarian offensive against the Byzantine Empire, which culminated in the purchasing of peace by Byzantine Emperor Romanos I Lekapinos. During the final Hungarian invasion of Europe, in 970, Grand Prince of Kiev Sviatoslav I attacked the Byzantine Empire with supporting Hungarian auxiliary troops, eventually facing defeat at the Battle of Arcadiopolis and effectively concluding the Hungarian invasions of Europe. In 1939, in the aftermath of the breakup of the Second Czechoslovak Republic, the formerly autonomous Carpatho-Ukraine declared independence on March 15. The same day, the Kingdom of Hungary occupied and annexed the territory. Over the course of a few days, the 40,000-strong Hungarian army overpowered the limited forces of the newly proclaimed unrecognized state, which had only 2,000 troops. By the 18th, Hungarian forces took full control of the territory of Carpatho-Ukraine. In the chaos that followed, an estimated 27,000 Ukrainian civilians were killed. Approximately 75,000 Ukrainians from the area sought asylum in the Soviet Union, of whom 60,000 ultimately died in Soviet gulags. The modern bilateral relationship between Hungary and Ukraine began in the early 1990s. After the end of communism in Hungary in 1989 and Ukrainian independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, as recently as 2016, relations between the two nations remained largely positive. In September 2017, then-President of Ukraine Petro Poroshenko signed the 2017 Ukrainian education law, which had previously been adopted by the Ukrainian parliament. The new law made Ukrainian the required language of study for all state schools in Ukraine past the 5th grade, reversing a 2012 law signed by ousted former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych that allowed regions with an ethnic minority making up more than 10% of the population to use minority languages in education, although mainly intended to discourage the use of Russian in public education. The policy meant that schools in Hungarian majority areas of Zakarpattia, including many funded directly by the Hungarian government, would be forced to stop teaching in the Hungarian language. The change in rules served as the catalyst for the rapid deterioration of relations between Hungary and Ukraine. Immediately after the adoption of the law, Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs Peter Szijjarto announced that Hungary would block all further integration of Ukraine into NATO and the European Union and offered to guarantee that all this will be painful for Ukraine in future. This marked a significant shift in Hungarian foreign policy towards Ukraine, as it had previously supported stronger Ukrainian integration into NATO and the European Union and advocated for visa-free travel between Ukraine and the European Union, largely in order to make travel to Hungary easier for the Hungarian minority in Ukraine. Following through on its promises, in October 2017, Hungary vetoed an fee